Howdy, folks. Happy Monday. We starting a should be an interesting week leading into, it was a very interesting week 18 in the NFL. I'm not going to go nuts about it because I just, even though my team won, I don't have a lot of confidence in them because they were playing half of a Miami Dolphins team and they had to wait till a fourth quarter rally to beat them. So it doesn't exactly infuse me with a bunch of confidence. Although the way things are going right now in the NFL, Russ, even the teams that are obviously San Francisco in the NFC and Baltimore in the AFC are the favorites.
Right.
But each of those teams have had injury. San Francisco is lucky they have the week off because McCaffrey pulled a calf last week, and he's pretty much their entire offense. Everything runs through him.
Yeah.
If he's not there, then Brock Purdy's not as successful. So nobody is invincible.
Nobody's invincible. I think they do have quite of a gap though over any other team. Yes. But the Ravens are the hottest, right? So who knows?
Yes, they are the hottest, although they didn't exactly they played every backup that they could against Pittsburgh, so
I don't count that.
That's not a reflection. But anyway, go ahead, put the pre-show.
All right. So growing up in the dark ages of soccer in the United States, I really knew nothing about professional soccer players. Mm-hmm. Kyle Rote Jr., why did I know he was a soccer player? Because he was on the what was the show, Mike, on ABC?
Oh, yeah, the Superstars.
He was on the Superstars show, and he was good. So then I was like, oh, he's a soccer player. Okay. But when the Cosmos got together, my dad was a printer, and he printed up some different things for them and programs, and I saw Pele was coming over, and I'm like, all right. Franz Beckenbauer was one of those big players, came from Germany. I didn't know anything about German soccer. I had no clue. But the guy was really talented and then became a great coach and everything else, and he passed away. And I just want to say I really enjoyed watching him and that team play. And we all, anybody who sort of grew up watching the Cosmos, that was the only soccer we knew for a lot of us.
Yeah, I watched some of those games on WOR out in New York.
That's how I watched it.
Yeah, and Jan was talking about it in our group chat, and it's funny because I looked it up I think Beckenbauer and Giorgio Canaglia, who was the one that because he was with Italy.
Because he was Italian, yeah.
I think they played in the 66 World Cup, and they came over in 75, 70.
Right.
So they were the NASL. They were basically over the hill, and Pele was over the hill. So he was. He was coming here to make money, and I don't
over the hill maybe for their standards, but he was lighting it up.
Oh yeah, because the NASL, the talent level. That's one thing I'll give MLS. MLS, the talent level is much higher than the NASL was in its day. It's still not. It doesn't compare to the Premier League.
Don't work on Shep Messing, because then I'm going to get angry with you. I like Shep Messing.
Well, please. The funny thing is, those guys were also in the MISL, in the major indoor soccer league. I remember Shep.
Earn a living, Mike.
Yeah. No. I know. It's please. There were the guys, the Buffalo Stallions of the MISL. They had these Yugoslav players, the Petroviches, and I'm just saying I looked them up, and they were in their prime again in the 60s, and they came over in 81. So they were probably making $5 an hour playing.
Land of opportunity here.
Oh yeah, the land of milk and honey and soccer balls bouncing off the glass at the same arena that Buffalo Sabres play at.
So the last thing you want to bring up, that Odyssey right now is in operating bankruptcy, and they own 350 stations, including WFAN and KRBQ, if I read that right, in LA, which is massive station.
Now,
a lot of the big stations, honestly.
Now, okay, that's the thing. There's an Odyssey app where a lot of these stations are linked to. I don't know if that means they own the station.
Oh, no, that means they own it.
Okay, so WGR, which is the sports radio station in Buffalo, they're on Odyssey.
Yeah, so I don't know. I get what you're saying. I would assume they own it. Could they have other partnerships? Maybe. So I don't know about GR because I didn't see them mentioned. Right. But I saw those other ones mentioned, and there's 350. So chances are it could be them.
Right, but this is a mechanism for a lot of people to listen to sports radio and talk shows and stuff like. And that's the thing. It's like, I mean, we all know that radio is dying. We all know what's going on when it comes to sports and radio, where like play-by-play announcers aren't traveling with teams anymore. Like in Toronto, they're broadcasting the road games from Scotiabank Arena from the press box. They're not traveling with the team. Though the odd thing is, like Buffalo, they actually travel with the team.
Right.
There you go. Thumbs up.
We don't know why.
Oh, by the way, I will tell you, something is really bizarre with this, because I was doing another podcast, not on StreamYard, on another service. It was like I was doing the Ladies Talking Leafs podcast. They had me as their guest. We were talking about Nylander, which we're going to talk about in a second. And I was on there, and the friggin' thumbs up was popping up. It's on a different service. It's not on StreamYard. It was on
your computer. It's the thumbs up virus.
So somebody has fucking has hacked into my computer. Sorry about that. And I'm getting the thumbs up. I'm waiting for the friggin' fireworks to go again. That's but
that was fun. The fireworks. Hey, I'm all for it.
Oh, I know you're for it, because it pisses me off. All right, here we go. Hello, Hockey World. Today is Monday, January 8th, 2024.
I'm Russ Cohen, and I'm happy it's 2024, by golly.
And I'm Michael Lagella, and I know Russ is very happy that the New York Jets beat Bill Belichick yesterday, possibly for the final time. And this is
become a snowman. It was fantastic.
Although Russ, I did hear a report this afternoon that Belichick is willing to give up the operational player personnel. So I will bet you that was not the last time.
It may not be.
And this is the Hockey Buzzcast here on HockeyBuzz.com. Okay, we talked about it on Off the Post on Sunday. We'll talk about it here because now it's official. And I'm sure everybody is like waiting with bated breath to see what my reaction is. You know what my reaction is. But the Maple Leafs signed William Nylander to an 8-year, $92 million contract on Monday. The contract, and I'm just pulling up just the particulars on this because I want to get it exactly right. Now, most of it, unshockingly, is signing bonus, especially in the first 4 years, 10 million, 10 million, 11.5 million, 10.5 million. Then it goes down. But still, the signing bonus, if there wasn't a no movement clause, is enough of a no movement clause in terms of a deterrent, right? In terms of a poison pill, and in terms of not being able to buy him out without.
Mike, Eric Thatcher has the answer for you.
It's your Apple computer. It's a setting called reactions. Oh, okay. Well, Eric, if I'll look on there because I'll
see. You may have done it to yourself.
No, it's the computer. It's like the M5 on Star Trek, or it's like HAL from 2001.
Sure. Okay, Mike.
It has a mind of its own. But the contract is the richest in Maple Leaf history, because the reason they say that is because the Matthews deal is only 4 years, and his is, let's see, 13.25 times 4 is 26, 52, 50, $53 million for 4 years, but Nylander is $92 million. Wow. Okay, I'll get your reaction first, and then I'll react. But go ahead.
My first reaction is, I don't know if you know this, the Yankees turned down Marcus Stroman because of the way he S-talked the Mets on the way out. The Yankees he was trying to sign on with the Yankees.
He's also shit talked the Yankees too. So that piece of crap, he can go to hell.
He's trying to get a contract. Here's my reaction. So
yeah, I know, Peter. You walked in. You walked into that one. I was talking about Marcus Stroman. So.
Oh, no worries.
Yeah,
all of Canada knows that.
I wouldn't say that to hockey, because when it comes to football and when it comes to baseball, I can be as untethered as I want to be. But yeah,
So as far as the signing, sure. Is it more than we'd all want to pay? Yes. But I do think Brad Treliving, when he couldn't trade him last summer, put himself into a corner. And we don't know what the deals were like, and we don't know. But again, it's not up for us to make deals for Brad Treliving. It's up to him and the front office staff to have the creativity to be able to get it done. But they didn't. So that's when I knew during the summer he was going to get signed, because I realized this trade's never happening. And so he wasn't going to let the asset go, which would be ridiculous, like Mike said all the time, as the scorer that he is. So they had to sign him. And I do think at some point someone will get traded. I think I'm not mad that he got the money. The players always deserve whatever they can get.
Mm-hmm.
Do I think it hampers their cap a little? Yeah, of course I do.
All right, Peter.
Well,
I was going to say, Winnipeg. Yeah,
Okay,
Winnipeg went through this scenario with Scheifele and with Hellebuck. And the difference here is that Scheifele and Hellebuck took what I considered to be, I think Hellebuck is one of the top 3 goaltenders in the league. So he could have demanded on a 7 or 8 year deal. He could have gotten close to what Bobrovsky got, but he didn't.
What's Hellebuck worth right now versus what he was worth in August?
Right. Yeah. Carey Price is the highest goaltender in the league at 10.5. There you go. Yep. That's what it is, Russ. When I put my finger up like this, it reacts. Okay, so
don't do the middle finger.
No.
Does it work?
There you go. It probably will.
How do I turn on these
it's probably me. It's probably on my monitor. But okay, so Carey Price is the highest goalie at 10.5. Bobrovsky is at 10. Vasilevsky, I'm doing this off the top of my head. Vasilevsky, I think, is 9.5. So Hellebuck could have asked for 9.5. He could have gotten that much. He got 7.5. Scheifele, maybe, I think he's a good center. I don't think he's, in the stratosphere of guys like McKinnon or McDavid. But
no,
so
he's not.
He's not. But he got, 7.5, I think. I mean, that's a much more reasonable deal than like Ryan Johansson got or somebody Tyler Seguin got. So they took less to stay where they are. And that is my issue with Nylander. Nylander didn't leave one friggin' red cent on the table. He didn't.
Not a toonie to be found.
He got everything that he could.
So what does that tell you about the last 3 deals that the Leafs assigned to their core 4 stars?
Mm-hmm.
There's a surcharge.
Money that
one could assume that there is a surcharge for playing in Toronto.
Well, okay.
One could assume that for what we're going to take by being here, you have to now pay us more. And not only that, the reverse, and here's the thing that I think a lot of people kind of don't remember, not forget or don't know about. They just don't remember. We talk about tax advantages on the personal income tax in certain states and stuff, and how that particular, let's use Florida, and because Stamkos is a recent comparable. He stayed in Florida. He makes blah, blah.
Right.
The other part about playing in Toronto is you have endorsement possibilities out the wazoo.
Mm-hmm.
I personally know of a former Leafs player who was not a particularly good player, let alone a star, who made out like a bandit off the ice.
Yeah.
And that also has a thing. These guys, like being there, they're going to have some incredible opportunities to maximize earning. Mm-hmm. But for you to play in that market, if I'm Nylander, you read it every day in the press. You've got Mike Agello burning down your throat at scrums and stuff like that. Like, you've got all this attention. It weighs on you. There's a cost to being there.
Yes, but, and as it's been pointed out,
there could be a cost to being there.
Well, as it's been pointed out, he is, he's cool as a cucumber, and it doesn't seem to matter to him, the criticism, because he's been the most criticized Leaf over the last 4 or 5 years, and it really hasn't fazed him. So that, I mean, that sort of Teflon that they said Phil Kessel had, which he didn't really have. He just never could express himself in the media and didn't like the media. But I think he heard it. I think obviously he heard the criticism, because at that point, he was the highest paid Leaf, and I don't know about Phaneuf, but this is the thing. And everything is comparables, really. It is. Yeah. And I was looking. I looked at this up when I was talking to Russ. At $11.5 million, he's making more than David Pastrnak, and he's the second, as of the beginning of next year, he's the second highest paid winger in the NHL behind Artemi Panarin. He is not Panarin, and he is not Pastrnak. So it's an overpay. It's a
direct prices keep go up too since those guys signed.
Sure. And the cap, this contract doesn't go into effect until next year, when the cap probably is going up to 87 or 88. But this is the issue here. And it's like, everybody thinks like I because I've railed on this contract and I've been a critic of Nylander. It's not that I don't think he's a good player. I think he's a really good player. Yeah. It's just the fact that now he's being paid as a core piece.
You have to take out Nylander, the person and the player, away from the situation. Nylander can be anyone. Like, he can be Joe Blow. He doesn't have to. Don't worry about being Michael Nylander. You now have $40 million locked up in 4 guys.
Well, it's worth because now what you just said before. There's one exception to the rule. Morgan Riley took $7.5 million times 8 years. And if you look at the defenseman contracts, that's a very reasonable contract. And he didn't have a very good year last year, but he had a great playoff. He's having a really good year this year. He's only 29 years old. That contract, at least for the next 4 or 5 years, is going to age well. And it's not a ridiculous contract. Austin Matthews deserves to get every penny he gets. He's one of the best scorers in the league. He's one of the top 3 or 4 forwards in the league. It's the precedent that was set, and it started, and I'll be brief on this because I've said it many a time. It started with Lou Lamoriello back in 2017, when Nylander had a year left on his entry-level contract. He had an opportunity to sign him to an extension coming off of one 60-point season. He could have gotten him signed on a bridge deal for around $4 to $5 million. Lou, because he's got the Lou rules, decided, I'm not going to extend him because I want him to earn his next contract. I don't want to set the precedent, blah, 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 blah. He didn't. Nylander had another big year, and then Lou gets let go, and it's left on Kyle Dubas's lap. And the first thing
is a million years ago.
Wait, I know, but Russ, Jesus, let me finish. Once the precedent was set, where Dubas succumbed to Nylander in negotiations, they didn't trade him. They could have traded him. They could have gotten Alex Pietrangelo for him. That was the rumor in December when St. Louis was falling apart. They could have gotten Pietrangelo for him, but they decided not to do that. They kept him. They signed him for almost $7 million a year on a 6-year deal. And then they had signed Tavares, and then in the span of a year, they signed Matthews, and they don't get Matthews on 8 years. They get Matthews on 5 years at 11.6. He was the second highest paid player in the league, and they paid him one of the top 3 or 4 salaries. And then they signed Marner at almost $11 million. So you've got the 4 players making over $40 million. Now the 5 players, all with no move clauses, but folks, are making $54 million. It's over 60%. It's close to 60% of the cap. So you've got $34 million. If the cap is 88, you've got $34 million to fill out the remaining 18 players on your roster. Good luck, folks.
All right.
Good
so
luck.
here's
going to be tough.
Here's my answer to it. So I kind of look at things like, what is a guy giving me for the money? So let's say cost per goal, right?
Yeah.
And so, but also, as Peter has said, not everybody can play in Toronto. We know that.
Yeah.
So you have to factor in, I don't have a mathematical formula for that. But right now, at this moment, Sam Reinhart's a bargain compared to William Nylander for the goals he's given. And shockingly, and Mike might know the answer, so Sam Reinhart just got his 7th career hat trick. How many does William Nylander have?
I'm sorry, how many does Nylander have?
How many hat tricks careers? Reinhardt's got 7.
Maybe 2. I don't know for sure.
He's got 1.
1, okay, yeah.
And so you look at Reinhardt and you say, okay, that's really a bargain, but you don't know if he could do that in Toronto. And so that's the other part of this contract is Nylander's doing it in Toronto. He's doing it in the playoffs in Toronto where many have failed. And so your cost per goal is a lot higher on the Leafs than it is on a lot of other teams. And the only way to make up the difference on that is through young players and drafting and those cheaper guys in your lineup. And they did it for a little while with guys like Bunting and stuff. They were getting, 25 goals out of guys they barely paid $2 million for, 2.5. But that's what they have to do. And that's what could really wear them out. Like, that's the part that makes GMing a lot harder. And to be honest, I don't know if Treliving's that guy.
Well,
we're going to find that out.
That's a really good point.
He's well respected in the league, Russ, that doesn't really mean a lot. But I'll say this: a lot of players do want to play in Toronto. A lot of players want to finish their career out in Toronto, like Giordano, and Giordano took $800,000. So they're going to have to find probably another couple players, like they did with Bogosian, like they did with Joe Thornton. They're going to have to find probably 2 or 3 veterans to come in late, like Blake Wheeler did with the Rangers, to come in at less than $1 million and probably find a couple entry-level guys too. Peter, go, then Jan.
Well, you know what? To that point, I think there are going to be guys like that. Despite the cap going up, I think you're going to see the odd situation take a Blake Wheeler where he's bought out and he can go play. He's got a bunch of money. He can go play in a market. Like, I'm happy for Blake Wheeler. He's, second, he's got a team that's second in the league overall. And just for you, Jan. And
I know exactly where you're going.
He may not be the guy you thought he was getting, but he I'm happy for them, and I think he's going to be valuable to the Rangers in terms of some stuff going forward. And I think there's going to be more players like that. I think there's more and more GMs who are going to look at those things and saying, the Jets navigated something very interesting last year, and they should use this as an example. If they got rid of something, they made some changes, they made a good trade, they bounced back. They could have gone the other way, but they bounced back. And, don't be afraid of using that. If you've got the team on arguably other than Arizona, the tightest budget in the league, who's willing to buy out Wheeler and take a cap hit, then anyone should be able to do it.
Yeah. I mean,
and I think to that point, there's going to be players that Treliving can pick up, but he's got to be savvy. He's got to be thinking about it, and he's got to be aware and quick to react and have a sales job ready. It's not hard to sell someone to play in New York City, that's for sure. But it is harder to get someone to play in Toronto.
I think one of the things that he's going to have to do is if he sees a bargain out there for next year that he can sign, like say, and I'm not jumping at conclusions here, but Samsonov is a free agent at the end of the year, and they're going to need a goaltender to be the 1B for Joseph Woll. Based on what Martin Jones is doing right now, you could sign Martin Jones for $1 million for a year, which you could bury in the minors if he turns out not to be good or if you find another opportunity out there. But you could sign him for $1 million a year, and then you're spending less than $2 million on your goaltending tandem, which you're going to have to do because you're paying $54 million to your top 5 guys. He's going to have to do things like that to get through next year, because I don't think they're going to be able to trade a guy like Marner. He's got a no-move clause. I don't think he's waiving it. I know people out there are telling me they're going to trade.
They're
hoping. I don't know how it's going to happen, but what did you think of the Nylander contract? I want to get your opinion.
So a couple of things. So it's interesting how viewpoints change. 2 months ago, Mike, if I had said Martin Jones was your starting goaltender, you would have been gagging like crazy. Right?
I know.
In the off season, Blake Wheeler everybody was going, what in God's name is Chris Drury thinking by signing Blake Wheeler? Now, granted,
what about Jonathan Quick?
Quick was horrible in preseason too, right? And Wheeler is to a certain extent misplaced on the first line right now. He probably belongs on the third line, but he moved up based upon some injuries. When you talk about identifying guys, if you look at the guys that Toronto has identified in the past and put in roles like that, it has not really succeeded for the most part, right? You have to be smart, especially on the blue line. Putting 35 and 36-year-old guys on your blue line is usually not a recipe for success in a league that's now predicated with having speed. I think the Lakers tried that also by getting all these guys on minimum deals, and I think it worked once, but then it backfired almost every other year. What you need is there are guys on PTOs who you can sign. Look, Rangers did it last year with Jimmy Vesey, right? Signed him, and then he signed him not to a 1-year deal, but to a 2-year deal for $800,000, which was shocking to all of us because we thought he'd get more, but clearly he realized what his value was and he wanted to stay in New York. But we all knew Nylander was going to get paid. The only question was what was the figure going to be? How high was it going to be? Were they going to go 11? Were they going 11.5? Turns out he went that way. The benefit is, to a certain extent, the cap is rising. They have a couple of guys who are coming off the cap next year, but they're going to have to take care of core guys down the road, and they're going to have to supplement it. And right now, Toronto's really hoping that hockey-related revenue number starts to spike every single year, because if not, 2-3 years down the road, they're going to be in a lot of trouble trying to put together a team.
Well, that's what they were hoping for when they signed these guys, and then the pandemic hit and everything flattened out. I also think, Russ, even though there might be situations where some of these players might not be ready, Fraser Minton, who played 4 games for them, and I don't think was ready, but they rewarded him for a good training camp. He might be in their lineup next year. Easton Cowan might.
No, he won't be in the lineup next year. That would be crazy.
They may have to. I'm serious. I think that they're going to have to. I don't know.
No, I'll tell you what they should do.
Okay.
The same way that you have your 6'7" goalie from the SHL, they're going to have to scour the other leagues and get a couple players in camp, like Jan suggesting, and try those guys out. You know what the NHL guys are like, so you don't really have to dig deep for them. If at last minute you need some, there's always those guys. The Zach Sanfords are always out there, right?
So you're saying they should be going out for the Alexander Barabanov?
Yeah, you got to find those guys, or guys that are wanting to get back into the NHL and are willing to play in Toronto for a year. Even as an example, Peter, what's the name of the Russian defenseman, the big guy that Vancouver drafted and he's never come back?
Tremakin.
Right.
Yeah, Tremakin.
What if you call him up and say, hey, you want to play for the Leafs next year? I'll guarantee you some playing time on a 1-year deal. Some stuff like that. They're going to have to do that.
Exactly. You're going to have to mine for diamonds in different places. And you need your geologists out there right now.
Now,
yeah.
Thomas is bringing up a good point in the chat. We mentioned Reinhart, and Jake Gensel is the other big free agent potential guy this summer. What does Nylander do to affect the price tag for those players? Reinhart, I have a feeling Reinhart, Florida's got a lot of money coming off the cap after this year, and Reinhart will probably take a little bit less because of the Florida state tax situation. He could get 9.5 from the Panthers, and that's almost like 11 or 11.5 in Toronto. So, but Gensel, he's not getting that kind of money from the Penguins. They don't have the room.
No, they don't have it. I don't know if he's getting that money from anybody. I think there's a limit to Jake Gensel. I think 9 would be the limit. That would be the high for Jake.
You think
he's a 40 goal scorer, Russ? He's a 40 goal scorer.
They think he's a creation of Crosby. That's the
problem is nobody has seen Jake Gensel without Sidney Crosby. And
is Reinhart a creation of playing with? But is Reinhart a creation of playing with Barkov?
Sam Reinhart has scored before, just not to this degree.
He was a 30 goal.
So is he a creation of Barkov then?
No.
Right? It goes hand in hand to a certain extent.
He was a 30 goal scorer in Buffalo, and he
was not. He was a 20 plus. I just looked. I don't think he scored 30 in Buffalo.
Okay, but even if he's 25,
23, 17, 25, 22, 22, 25. He went to Florida and had 33 his first year in Florida.
No, that's fine. But again, he was able to score 25. We don't know what Gensel is going to be like without Crosby. We have no idea. And at this point, and how old is Jake Gensel at this point?
29. And
so
Reinhart's 28.
He's going to want 6-7 years. I'd offer him 8.5, and I probably would say I'll give you 7 years, and that's it.
But if let's suspend belief. Let's say the Devils had not traded for Timo Meier. They had a spot available. You're not going
Yeah.
to tell me that Jake Gensel's not going to score opposite Jack Hughes of a player
And-
or
and
somebody
there-
of that ilk?
And there's another example. Timo Meier gets traded from San Jose to New Jersey. He's got all the leverage in the world. And because he wanted to play with the Swiss Mafia in Newark, he wanted to play with Heischier and Siegenthaler, he took less. He got 8.5. That's what I mean. Everybody seems to take less.
Jan makes a good point here. And that's where Fitzgerald could have tried to read the tea leaves and say, next year, Gensel's going to try and leave. Why am I signing Meier to this long-term deal? And I wouldn't have signed him to that, at least not that deal.
So, do you want to take a risk on the open market if you lose Nylander?
Oh, no, you understand why Meier did it, right? I'm talking about why did
Oh,
Fitzgerald.
we get why Meier did it. I didn't understand.
Fitzgerald could sell. I mean, look what the Devils had. He had a lot of chips that he could sell. He's got both Hughes boys. He's got Nemec. He's got a bunch of other guys that he could easily sell to a guy who's looking to come there. I mean, that's not a hard sell.
Well, Peter, I mean, I was like I said many a time on the show before the season started. Toronto, if they were going to, if they couldn't get Nylander signed on an extension, they were going to have to trade him before the start of the season, because as soon as the season started, they weren't trading him. It was either he was going to walk or they were going to sign him. And
here's the thing that also I would expect when Nylander just said, "Screw it. If you're going to sign me, I'm going to take every last nickel on the table." This is the second contract in a row that they let it get this far. They did. You know what? If I'm him, I'm like, 2 times in a row, guys.
Well, he was putting the screw to him this time. He wasn't.
Yeah,
he screwed him last time. Lily take him to the wire. He's like, you know what? You're going to pay me now. You had your shot. Now you're going to pay me.
Nylander can afford
I'm right with you, Jan. I'm right with you, and I don't blame him.
With no foam, he could afford that now.
Well, see, okay, this is and okay. Some people are criticizing Treliving on this, but this is where I think that the chicanery being pulled by Michael Nylander and Louis Gross reared its ugly head. Supposedly the Leafs offered him in the high 8s or low 9s during the summer. And people were basically saying, well, if you're going to do that, you should have pushed and offered 9.5 and gotten him signed during the summer. They were never taking it. They wanted to go into the season. They were doing the same bull crap run around that they did with Goudreau and Calgary.
It's not bull crap.
No. I know that it's negotiating, and that's the thing. But
took a bet. He took a bet on himself, Mike.
Well, no.
Bet on himself, and he won.
Well, okay, but what I'm saying is they were never going to sign during the summer. They wanted to now if he had a bad beginning of the season, then they would have had a bad negotiating position, and they probably would have said, okay, we'll take 8.8. There was no downside. There was all upside if he performed well, and he's performed well. But what I think the Leafs have to worry about is that I've always said when he's good Nylander, it's Dr. Nylander. When he's bad Nylander, he's Mr. Willie, like Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. We haven't seen Mr. Willie for a while. If he all of a sudden appears after he signs the long-term contract, the Leafs are screwed. So that's
a risk you take with any long-term deal. It happened in Jersey with Timo Meier now.
Yeah, he hasn't played well since he signed the deal.
Ask any Flames fan about Huberdeau.
Oh, my God.
The history's littered with these things.
That's the cautionary tale.
That's the cautionary tale. So you either live afraid of making a mistake, or you risk manage it in a way so that if it doesn't work out, you've got plan B, C, D, E, and F. Yeah, you may not like
D, E,
and F, but you got to have them.
To be fair, they don't have that. I think we could all see that. The Leafs don't have a plan B, C, D.
I work in the insurance world, so I always think about risk this way.
I know. I don't think they have that.
I work in risk and controls also, Pete, so that's part of my job.
Yes, exactly.
Look, I mean, to Mike's point, they negotiated from a point of weakness, and they got taken. Like, that's what happens.
Now, and I said this on Off the Post. Nobody, Kyle Dubas. Oh, actually, I said it on another show. Kyle Dubas, in his last press conference as GM, did not say we're bringing the core back. He left it
Right.
basically. He left it open, which I thought meant, okay, Nylander's getting traded or something's going to happen, and then he never was able to follow through on that because of what happened. Treliving comes in. The first thing he's got to do, he goes to talk to Matthews. He gets Matthews signed. He knows he's got to lock up Nylander. He's like Russ just said, he's operating from a position of weakness. Now you could say, well, get him signed before the season. If they didn't want to sign, if they wanted to go into the season to increase their leverage, then he has no lever. He has no point where he can. And if management is saying to him, well, you got to get this guy signed, he can pursue the guy all he wants. When they want to sign, they want to sign. And if they're saying 11.5, then it's either pay that or we'll see ya. So
and I think we all know nobody else was paying him 11.5.
No. And that's the thing. It's like he goes to free agency. He gets a 7-year deal. So 92 million. What's 92 million divided by 7? Nobody's paying him what, $15 million? No one.
13 million a year. That's 13 million a year.
Yeah,
no one is paying. He'd be the second highest paid player in the NHL. Nobody is paying him that.
That's not his concern.
No.
It's not.
No, it's not. But what I'm saying, Peter, is that is his concern if he's going to free agency, if he wants to make top dollar. It was always the 8th year is always a benefit for the team who can extend that. But in this instance, it wasn't, because he got top dollar and he got the 8 years. So it's just, I don't know. Anyway, I want to touch on a couple of things before we end the show. Jan, the game of the night tonight is Vancouver and the Rangers. I'm going to be watching and I'm looking forward to it. I don't know if Shesterkin is starting. I don't know if Demko start. Okay, it should be Demko. I hope it's Demko because these are two of the best teams in the league, and it's a game to look forward to.
So what I'm looking forward to seeing actually is, the New York market doesn't see him enough. Obviously, we see the other two Hugheses a lot. I'm looking forward to seeing Quinn Hughes because Quinn Hughes has really taken his game to a whole nother level. We talk about Pettersson, who's had a big year. We talk about, obviously, JT Miller's had a big year, who comes back to New York. We talk about Besser. Granted, on the flip side, Kuzmenko has been MIA and on a milk carton basically out there because he can't play defense.
Yeah, he was
right
an overpay. They're not getting back on that.
But Hughes has taken a massive step forward, and Demko's having a pretty fine season. And the talent level that's going to be on the ice tonight, because you look at what Panarin's doing. You look at, obviously, Zibanejad, Kreider. You have Fox matching up against Hughes. You have Demko matching up against Shesterkin. It's a pretty fun matchup, and I wager if you had asked anybody before the season if Vancouver would be in the position that they're in, you'd get very few responses in the affirmative, because I don't think anybody expected this. But guys have taken major steps forward, and they're being rewarded for it, and they've been much better defensively. Obviously, the Roenick trade has worked out very well for them, getting him from Detroit because he's given a ballast to Hughes, and Tyler Myers has been pretty solid as well. So I think the surprising part has been more their back end and their goaltending, because we knew they had offense that they could score.
Since you mentioned Tyler Myers, and I was unaware, Quentin Grimes, the Knicks point guard, is his brother. And so he's going to be at the game. Had no idea.
I had no idea.
It's been talked about a lot in New York because of the fact that, they've had him in town. So, yes.
Right. So it's nice that he's going to be able to watch his brother play hockey at the Garden. That's really cool. Really cool. The other thing is, if I were a newspaper guy in New York, I would be writing how the Rangers, when they drafted JT Miller, I thought, hey, this is a good draft pick. Nowhere in my wildest dreams did I think JT Miller was going to end up the player he is right now. I give him tremendous credit. Well, there was no way of knowing he would turn into this. No way.
There's a couple things on that. So first of all, he's talked a lot about torts, and we talk a lot about torts a lot just from the nature of what we see a lot. He said torts. He didn't use my term, not his beat the tar out of him, but he sure as heck made him a heck of a lot better defensively and taught him how to play the game, which he didn't know beforehand. And honestly, it wasn't the first move, because including him in the trade to Tampa, which was an absolutely horrific trade by the Rangers, because they got Libor Hayek and Brett Howden and other in that trade, which was a garbage deal. But even in Tampa, he had a good year, but then he got sent down to the third line, if you remember that following year. And then he ended up going to Vancouver, which is where he found his game. So it took him 2 moves to really become the type of player that he could be, where he was a first-round pick. But kudos go to the Canucks who've used him right, and he's become a heck of a player.
He's really turned into something great.
And the funny thing is, Peter, Vancouver had to choose between re-signing Horvat and signing Miller. They signed Miller. They would have gone. They would have been successful either way. Because
no, but I got to tell you something. At that time, I was wondering if they might have overpaid for Miller. I didn't really say anything out loud because I wasn't sure. But I thought Canucks went really deep for Miller when it was like Peter said, there was some risk in that deal at that time.
Yeah, but what I'm saying is, I mean, Horvat is having a really good year with the Islanders, and he's a really good player. I mean, either way, they would have made the right choice. I mean, they didn't get a great return for Horvat.
But Miller's better. That's the funny thing. Miller is now.
Miller ended up being, but both of them are good.
Miller is. Go ahead, Peter. Sorry, go ahead. I'll finish.
I was just going to say Miller just fits better.
Yeah,
what the Canucks are trying to do.
Yeah,
and I don't necessarily think Horvat fits particularly well with the Islanders either.
Well, you have two guys who are really centers.
You
have two guys who are really centers, and one guy's now moved to wing.
That's the thing. Yeah. Horvat is not a number one center, and he's forced to play because the Islanders.
Well, here's a hint: put Barzal as your first line center. If you could put Horvat. But again, I wouldn't put Horvat as my second line center there because Brock Nelson's been damn good. That's not been the problem. The problem is you're paying JP Pajot as your third line center $5 million. You don't have any wingers to go with either one of these guys that are scoring to be able to score, and that's
and I think, Jan, to your point, I think this is something that happens that GMs lose track of, and that is you would rather trade for a player and know where he's going to be based on what he is right now, not hoping that he can be this for you. Mm-hmm. Like, don't elevate a player to you on your roster until they've proven they can go there, right? Be that person there. Well, if they get to number one, that's fine if they earn it. But and that's to your point of Brock Nelson. How do you trade for Horvat saying, well, the guy really is a number two, but Brock Nelson's been good? Then you're upsetting the apple cart.
Right.
Right. And I think that mistake is something that isn't talked about enough and is looked at and should be looked at a lot more. Don't trade for what you expect someone to be. Trade for what they are. And if they exceed your expectations, that's what JT Miller's done.
And they won in Meyer, right? Remember, they were all knee deep into Meyer. Mm-hmm. And then I think the word basically came down that he didn't want to go to if he did go to the Islanders, he wasn't going to sign a long-term extension there. And they pivoted. And they ended up, I don't know if it was a panic pivot, but they pivoted and basically added another guy. And they're recreating the chemistry between Horvat and Barzal, which is fine. The problem is you just don't have other pieces there that you need. Obviously, Dobson's had a great year, but their wingers are bereft of
here's an interesting thing.
Ability.
So, Pierre Engvall's on their second line.
So right now, Thomas writes Dobson is the best defenseman in hockey. And I think he's up there. I don't think he's the best. But what's interesting is if you ever went back and looked, and I went back and looked, when I was doing draft rankings that year, and by the way, my new rankings are out on NHLDraftBuzz.com. You go see them right now.
Self-push.
But at any rate, going back to that, I did write an article before the draft that, October that year that, hey, I think Quinn Hughes is a generational talent.
Yes.
Then I saw Noah Dobson really developing to a point where I said, this guy gained some weight and can play that rock-solid defense he's playing, gets a little faster. This guy could really be something. And I put Dobson, I've had him higher ranked than Quinn Hughes in that draft. And I was like, and it wasn't because I felt like he was going to be necessarily better, wasn't going to be better offensively, but he was going to be better all around. And I think that's the difference between the two. I think Hughes, while good defensively, still isn't what Dobson is defensively. And while Dobson's offense is much better, will never be at the level of Quinn Hughes. But yeah, he's a heck of a player.
I think the difference maker also, I think Dobson is how Hughes is better offensively. Dobson is better defensively. Dobson is a much more physical defenseman than Hughes is, and Hughes uses his skating ability to be able to get out of trouble, while Dobson can use his physical play to be able to knock guys off the puck and be able to create offense.
Yeah, the other beneficiary of the Nylander deal is going to be Elias Pettersson, because if Nylander is getting 11.5, Pettersson's getting 12. I mean, he's gonna break the bank because the year he's having, and he's a center, he'll make a lot more. Finish off the show with this because Jan, I know you mentioned Bedard in the chat. We talked a little bit about it, I think, on Friday, but it's It's a fractured jaw. He's probably missing the All-Star game. I heard Elliot Friedman and Jeff Merrick talk about it on their podcast. And one of the things that they talked about is they made the comparison, and I remember this a long time. This is going back to ancient history. But Wayne Gretzky was playing the Maple Leafs in the early 80s. I think it was 81. And a player named Bill McCreary, not the referee, but a player, Bill McCreary, hit Gretzky at center ice and knocked him silly. And when he went back to the bench, the players on the Leafs were not high-fiving him and giving him, like, patting him on the back. They were basically saying, are you trying to get us killed? Because they had Semenko and, Dave Hunter and a bunch of guys who were going to, Lee Fogelin, who were going to beat the crap out of him. And there was no fear in the game. There is no fear in the game like there was then. I know the game has changed. It's not going to be that new, but Brendan Smith steps up on Bedard. Nick Foligno is the only one that really steps up, and he fights and he breaks his finger. But I don't know if the responsibility is on Bedard not to put himself in that position, or it's in the responsibility.
It was a clean hit.
Totally.
The hit was a clean. So here's the fun part, right? If you're going to go across the middle and you're going to have your head down, you should expect to get hit, right? The same thing happens with the Rangers with Trouba, right? Every time Trouba lays a hit out, somebody fights him. Now, good. It's happened on the inverse. One of the Rangers got knocked down. Somebody responded similarly, because that's basically the mantra now is, if you knock my guy down, even if it's a fair and clean hit, I'm going to respond because you're taking action against our superstar.
Well, I'll tell you the flip side to it. I'll give you the flip side. I get that you should never have your head down, blah, 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 blah. Right. But we have to admit there are guys in the game that are just looking for that.
Sure.
I don't think Smith is, though. Smith isn't a headhunter.
No, and this was not.
It doesn't matter. It's a clean check, Jan. Yeah. But again, you have to understand there is definitely guys that know, and maybe even knew before Bedard played that game, that this is a habit of his. And if that opportunity comes up, so be it.
And this was not Scott Stevens on Lindros. It wasn't.
No, it doesn't have to be Scott Stevens. Don't you think that that this happens more often? Because again, you could just play hockey and there are guys with their head down and never get hit.
Right.
Like, I mean, that could happen, but it doesn't.
Or it's a player like Slavkovsky who gets hit high and he bounces right back up. I mean,
Slavkovsky's going to play in Philly tomorrow, or not tomorrow, the end of the week, whatever. He's going to play there soon, and he's going to get hit. Like, somebody on Philly is going to test him because he's a big guy.
Yeah. Like, the Bedard hit, it's the unfortunate reality of contact sport.
Yeah.
It wasn't a questionable time leading up to it. The contact was clean. It's just a perfect storm of a good hit on a vulnerable player that wasn't outrageously violent and just had an unfortunate result. I don't really think any other than Chicago fans is crying about the hit in any way, shape, or form.
No, Luke Richardson handled it the right way. But here's what I would ask you, Pete. You're dealing with youth hockey right now. So if 13-year-olds put their head down, are they getting their clock cleaned all the time?
Yes, because they're still learning how to hit. They're still learning how to throw and time a hit.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's what it is. Youth hockey is its own.
Well,
Russ, its own thing. Like you can't compare it.
Russ, if one thing that I do agree with that John Tortorella said within the last month, that players don't know how to get hit anymore. I
think that's fair.
Yeah, they don't prepare themselves to get hit. You're going to get hit in the NHL. Some of these leagues, you don't get hit. Now fighting is different, but in terms of
bracing yourself, like when you see somebody, if you're on the sideboards and somebody's on the ice, there is something to be said about turning a little bit and bracing yourself because that impact's coming. I agree. Guys are doing that less and less.
But don't turn your back. You get hit from behind. You get smashed into the boards, right? The best example is look at the NFL, right? Tua Tagliavola took basically training to learn how to fall, to learn how to get knocked down because he kept getting hurt. Every time he got sacked, he got hurt. This year, he made it through the entire year without getting hurt because honestly, he learned how to fall, which was an art form, so you don't get hurt.
He learned how to fall, but he also learned that he had to throw the ball in 2 seconds to not get hit.
Right.
So they augmented the offense. In hockey, you can't hide from being hit. It's like I'll use the example. The Leafs played Anaheim last week. Bobby McMahon gets called for a 5 in a game for boarding for hitting Manchukov. He was passing the puck. He was 6 or 7 feet away from the boards. McMahon hit him full force, clean, shoulder to shoulder, but he went into the boards, slid to the boards, and his face hit the dasher, and they called it 5 for boarding in a game. And it was a ridiculous call, and it's not because it was a Leaf player. It was a ridiculous call. Like there was another call in the Buffalo-Montreal game where Mitchell Stevens hit Peyton Krebs, and it was far away from the boards. It wasn't predatory. It wasn't on the numbers, but they called it. I don't think they called it a 5. I think they called it a 2.
I'll tell you this. I think the league's getting more of these right. When they call it a major and then look at it, most of the time they're backing off the major.
Right, but in the McMahon situation, they didn't, and it was bad.
So. I've been at games covering games where they had backed off.
Yes. All right. We'll be back on Wednesday for another edition of the Hockey Buzzcast for Jan Levine, who's wearing his New York Jets hat. I'm sure, Jan, you were very happy that they beat Bill Belichick in the final, potentially
a higher draft pick.
No, you want the win.
Sending Belichick out with a loss is a wonderful thing, but I'd rather have the 5th overall pick in the draft also.
The funny thing is, Jan, if Belichick stays in New England, he's got the 3rd pick in the draft now.
Yeah.
Yes.
So it actually benefited.
It's all right. It was nice to get the win. I don't care.
And Brees Hall should have gotten 1,000 yards if they knew how to count.
Should have. The guy knew how to count. So that guy should be fired.
There's a Jets theme here. Jan is wearing a Jets hat. Peter is Jets.
Peter with his first place Jets. Enjoy
his first place Jets in the Western Conference and in the NHL.
Moved on. Right.
Russ
he's hearkening to Sean Mania, so we're all good.
Right.
and myself, Mike Agello, who's very happy that the Yankees basically told Marcus Stroman to stick it up his rear end. We'll be back on Wednesday with another edition of the Hockey Buzzcast. Remember, without the buzz, it's just hockey.